All right. Can I start with a theme song?
Do it.
Okay, I promised. Every week I want to sing a new theme song. Here it is. It's the show, runner, show. It's the show about show running by two guys who run a show. And me.
God, the visual is really great too. I love it.
Honestly, I came up with that on the dog walk this morning for the full 20 minutes. I went dee, 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 dee.
Oh, welcome to the Showrunner Show, where every week we break down the intricacies of what it takes to run a show.
Yes.
I'm John Eric Dowdle, writer, director, showrunner, producer.
And I'm Drew Dowdle. Same things.
But better. Oh, snap. That was a little better. I'm Stacy Shabosky. I'm a writer. I'm a recovering actress.
And a producer.
And co-producer. And producer.
Yep.
And producer. And creator if the thing that we're currently developing goes forward.
At Hulu. Yeah.
Yeah, at Hulu.
Absolutely.
And I would have to say
Yeah, fingers
Stacy's
crossed.
underselling a little bit in that she operates very much as kind of our third partner in everything we do. And it is, a de facto showrunner.
Thanks.
Yeah. So today's theme, we wanted to break down if you have a movie idea and you're thinking about moving that to TV, like what that takes, what changes. It's not, if you're saying like, okay, I have this movie, it's, 2 hours long and I'm going to make it 6 episodes, which, I'll just break it up. Like it doesn't quite work that way. And we'll use our season 1 of Waco as kind of a test case, sample case, because that was initially Drew and I were actually doing research on something completely unrelated, and we stumbled across David Thibodeau's a survivor of Mount Carmel's book called A Place Called Waco, and we read that and we were immediately like, oh my God, this would make the most amazing movie. It'd be so interesting to see, the siege from the inside. And so we approached Thibodeau and we bought his book. So we originally wrote Waco as a feature script, and we had a studio read it and said, hey, if you adapt this into a limited series, we will greenlight you today. And we were like, done. We were open to the challenge. We were excited by the challenge. We knew we wanted to get into television, but we hadn't figured out how to do it yet. It was already way too long. It was a 150-page script. And yeah, and we had changed the margins to like squeeze more in. Like it was so unwieldy to begin with. And so we welcomed the opportunity, though it scared us because we hadn't done television before. And so we'll sort of talk you through that process.
I just want to jump into that's one scenario is that you're going in with a pitch or you're selling something and they go, we love it, but we want it to be TV. It can go in the other direction too. Another might be that you get an actor attached. And because I feel like actors, a lot of projects happen because an actor is interested, that's the go-go juice. And they might be like, hey, I'm sick of doing movies. I want to try my hand at all my friends are having fun making TV. I want to do that. Or it can be the opposite, that you go out and maybe they're only interested in a limited series. So I think that's another scenario in which, because I could see the listener going like, how would I possibly be asked to turn my film script into a TV show? And I think the actor way is another way. Drew,
Yeah, that is another way. I was going to say just a general trend. I think there's, it's worth noting when talking about, it primarily goes from, feature material or feature script to TV. It's primarily in that direction, especially over the last, 10 years when we had our screenplay for Waco. This was, 2015, it was a very different world in 2015, 2016, where there's like movie people did movies and TV people did TV. And there was not, a ton of mixing. There was a little bit more than there was, 10 years before that, but it's nothing like it is now. And I think, the last 7-8 years has been this like massive migration from feature to TV because just it's so hard to get movies made. It's harder and harder to get movies made where there's just more and more TV being made. So it makes sense that a lot of the, writers and a lot of the actors, you see actors doing TV now that 10 years ago never would do TV. So it's part of a larger trend of just migrating to TV because that's where really all the action is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when we did Waco, so our feature with Waco, the events of Waco start with like a kind of a siege on Mount Carmel. So like trucks and guns and, helicopters and things, and ends with this, big fire and, tanks. And so the scale was pretty big. So as a movie, just over and over, people kept saying, like, you're never going to get this made. This is going to cost you $50 million to do something like this. On the scale you're talking about, you just can't do this. You won't be able to build that building. You won't be able to, do all these things. But then in TV, because you can amortize that cost over episodes, it became cost effective to do, to have that kind of scale, because we were then getting 6 hours of, material out of the same 2 big events, spread over, 6 episodes was doable.
Right.
And also, again, to that, overall trend from, 2015 to now, you're seeing TV budgets have gotten quite a bit bigger than they historically had been. So I think when we were talking about Waco as a TV series, you can amortize the cost over episodes, but it's also, it was suddenly not that unusual to spend, $6 million an episode. Whereas, 5 years before that, that would have been considered, the biggest show on TV. Now it's like 10 million an episode is kind of, nobody sneezes at that anymore. It's kind of continues to go up.
Interesting.
Yeah, and just the quality. Like I remember I went to a dinner at the Directors Guild in about 2014, and at that time, I mean, this is now, I guess 9 years ago, the head of the Directors Guild at that dinner said, this last year, residuals from television have outpaced residuals from movies. If you're not thinking about getting into television, you should immediately start thinking about getting into television. That's where everything's going.
Wow.
And so back before our Waco journey, we were starting to think, okay, the business is heading there. When we started in films, it was, independent movies. It was, the era of, Soderbergh and Tarantino and all these, like, it was so exciting. Like, everything was independent movie based. And that was what the business was when we got into the business. And now, the thing you talk about on weekends is the shows you've watched, not the movies you've seen. And that was different, 20 years ago. And so we were looking to get into television. So we ended up going out with, and frankly, we immediately were like, okay, we're going to do this as a limited. Let's start breaking out the episodes. Let's start, and we just started, dividing the script into chunks and sort of broke out the script into 6 episodes and then started filling in the gaps and stuff, not realizing that's not really how you shift a movie script to television. There's some fundamental differences between a movie and television, which we actually didn't understand at that point. We were still newbies, and we went out and pitched it, and people wanted to buy it, but they wanted to buy it if we had someone who with more TV experience to help us reconceive the episodes.
I feel like that's a perfect example of what we're talking about last week, that you can be the creator. You guys were the creator, and you had a lot of respect and clout in the film world, but you hadn't done TV. So they didn't straight up say, you'll be the showrunners and no one, you won't need any help. You got more into that gray zone that we talked about last week of, yes, you're the creators and you were the showrunners, but they brought on another showrunner as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, at the time, I took that as like a criticism or kind of a failure. And like, I was like, oh, don't they believe in us? Yeah. I took it really personally. And then I was like, okay, I need to surrender to this process. I need to, I haven't been in this, through this process before. I need to surrender to this. And then we showed up on day one of, the writer's room, and it turns out the company name that the studio had chosen was Surrender Productions, which I was like, oh, okay, felt like a little, the universe saying like, yeah, good job, good job, like just rolling with it.
It sounds like you're talking a little bit about, you can't just take a script and chop it up. It's not about math of going like, well, I had 150 pages divided by 6, stretched out a little. I think it fundamentally, the DNA of what a TV show is supposed to be is a little bit different than the DNA of what a movie is supposed to be, which we'll get into in a sec. But for example, I think at first, when it was a movie, it was more thinking about the big set pieces, that there's going to be a siege at the top and that's going to be a big set piece. And, you'll have an interesting way into it, an interesting character point of view through Thibodeau. Then you'll have a bunch of stuff in the middle and then there'll be, the fire at the end and people trying to jump out windows and escape. And, that it's sort of grounded by those two big set pieces. When really, I think you guys had to rethink it, because I'm saying you guys because I was not involved in season 1. I was involved in this last one, but not season 1. You had to change it. And turn it into a character piece where really the driving engine is not those two interesting set pieces. They were there, but it's really about the character clash between Mike Shannon's character and Taylor Kitsch's character. And people always say that, right? TV is about characters. TV is about characters. And I feel like that's a perfect example of what they're talking about.
Yeah, I would say, they say, television is a character medium, whereas film is a story medium, so film, and I heard people say this, but it didn't really resonate with what that meant, whereas film is about what happens. Okay, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And in television, it's more this person experiences this thing, and then they experience this other thing, and then their relationship to this person changes, and then they change as a result of this. It's more in that character zone versus like the story zone. And Stace, you had a great litmus test for what makes a movie versus, we were trying to break down, like, what's the difference in, how do you know if you have a story, how do you know if it's a better feature or television show? And Stace, you came up with such a good...
Are you talking about acute versus chronic?
Yeah.
My faux medical term. Yeah. Do you have like an acute problem, or do you have a chronic problem? And if it's acute, it's probably going to be a movie, right? Because you're going to solve it by the end. Maybe a good example would be a problem or a goal. Like we were working on a project about Dorothy Kilgallen, right? Who's this really fascinating woman. And she died this fascinating, mysterious death, right? So originally we wrote it as a movie. And then they talked about like, could it be a limited series? Because this actress would be interested if it's a limited series, not interested if it's a film, because she wants to get into TV. Okay, cool. So because that was an acute problem, right? It's this one story about JFK, and it ends in her amazing, mysterious death. It could be a movie. It could be a limited, because that's still sort of, it's sort of like that in between. But it couldn't be an ongoing series, because if the whole thing is building up to one news story and one death, that's an acute problem. You can't stretch that out over 6 seasons of like, is she going to finally die? You know what I mean? Or like Friday Night Lights Forever. We've been looking at that, or the Friday Night Lights Forever. You guys should speak about this one. But that's another one, the difficulty of, if the whole thing is building up to one game, will they win it or lose it? That's an acute problem. And then you have to get into more the chronic problems of the relationships and things like that.
Yeah.
That was so inarticulate, but maybe you guys can speak to that.
Or Die Hard, there's a
perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
terrorist event. It's an acute problem. That's a real issue. Whereas, The Last of Us, kind of zombie apocalypse, that's an ongoing problem. That is something that you can go endlessly. You can deal with over a long period of time.
But then you can be quite clever with something like 24. See how all my references are from like 20 years ago? With 24 of going, it's, if you take an acute problem, but you just make it a crunched enough timeline and really stretch it out with little beats, then you can turn it into a chronic thing.
I can speak a little bit to the Waco experience too, in that conversion, and just, from a story standpoint or a writing standpoint, like as a feature, it was very much David Koresh and Gary Nesner, Taylor Kitsch and Mike Shannon, and then the supporting cast, and everyone else was kind of serving those two roles, which, to some extent stayed that way in the TV version. But one thing we quickly realized when we were working with, another, executive producer that had more TV experience, is just how much we could do with the rest of the cast. And pretty soon we were picking characters that didn't even exist in the screenplay. Like Michelle Jones, for example, was, one of the Branch Davidians. And, we realized there was just an incredibly great and powerful, tragic love story in her character. And it's not someone you would have picked, in the feature. There just wouldn't have been space for that. But, cut to shooting the show, and Julia Gardner's playing this character in an incredibly powerful way. And, we found like, wow, we can have, 12, 13 like meaningful characters in this show, just being 6 hours rather than 2. And those characters were maybe the most fun to write in a lot of ways. And, we still like to try to run a lot of the story through a couple leads. I think it's helpful to still, have to know who your leads are and to kind of run story through them. But you can just do so much more with supporting cast in TV.
Drew, what's your proprietary formula, your math formula for?
Yeah. We
I love this so much. Not to get too off topic, but
it's
Drew's
not a perfect.
It's a brilliant
formula.
It's so good.
But what was it? We had, we realized we kept, we love these supporting characters so much that we kept creating scenes with, it was like, number 12 on the call sheet scene with like number 28 on the call sheet, and
those numbers are based on the star of your show is number 1 on the call sheet, and number 25 on the call sheet may have a line or two.
Right. So it's loosely the amount of dialogue or the amount of real estate they have in the show, roughly. But we realized you could definitely have a scene with number 25 on the call sheet, but it has to be with your number 1 or number 2. It can't be with your number 12. And so we had a formula. I can't even remember exactly what it was now, but it was if the sum total of the 2 characters in a scene is greater than
10.
If it's greater than 10,
15 or something,
that scene shouldn't exist. If it has a number 1 or a number 2 in the scene, then the total can be anything you want. And that was
right. Anything goes. That's so funny.
So either of those guys can have a scene with anyone, but if you're number 5 on the call sheet and number 11 on the call sheet are having a scene, it's going to get cut because there's just not enough space.
Right.
And
that was actually super helpful in the writer's room because I think writers do get, again, sorry, not to get too off topic, but writers get very attracted to the quirky characters, the character actor characters. They're fun. It's fun to write for, usually number 18 on the call sheet's a little weirdo, and it's fun to write for weirdos,
Yep.
Like, no, gotta write for the heroes, not the weirdos.
Well, and to try and think of things in terms of winding stories, we want to get this beat, this moment out. How do you wind it through one of your leads? Is such an interesting kind of fun puzzle game to play. And one other thing too, in features, Drew and I came up, doing like horror films and then thrillers and a lot of the times it's like, oh, audience is bored until this big set piece happens. So cut everything you can before that. And then they want to get to this other big set piece. So cut everything between that. And it ends up squeezing out so much of the human stuff. And television, so much of television is the human stuff. It's the human stuff that makes you want to watch a show. It's those soulful moments that 2 people discuss privately on a show. That's what really draws you into television more than anything else. Like television is, economically built on 2 people talking deeply. Those scenes are the most cost-effective scenes to shoot. And because of that, TV is a medium of that kind of emotional connection. And frankly, that's, I feel like why we started writing in the first place. So it wasn't to write, big exploding things, but to write, how we experience the world, right? The things that we think about in the middle of the night or things that, we grapple with personally, like to explore and express those things in art is, what we, I feel like why we do this in the first place. And television really, that first experience of going like, oh my God, there's time for people's humanity in this medium really felt, to me like we're home. Oh, we've come home to this medium. We don't have to be like, oh, where's the jump scare? We can get away from that and be with human beings.
We call those, everybody calls those headspace scenes. There are different ways to look at it, but so if you see those index cards behind John, those are beats of a scene, right? And when you're doing it for a movie's going to be like 40 scenes. I usually do it just like as a list of scenes. But you're probably going to have 1, maybe 2 at the most things that say headspace. And they might not even be people talking about their feelings. It might just be somebody like staring into their whiskey glass or like staring at it's like trying to convey all the feelings. Whereas TV, really, it's more like They talk about the thing is going to happen, the thing happens, and then you have a headspace scene where they sort of debrief what just happened and how they feel about things now. And you'll have, when you're putting up your cards and shuffling them around, you'll have a lot of things that say, headspace, Joe and Mary Beth, headspace. It takes up a lot of the space and it's fun. Yeah. It's speeches too. That's the other thing you get to do a lot of is speeches.
Yeah, I love writing a speech.
You get to do a lot more speeches in TV than movies.
Yeah, in movies, your speeches all get cut. Like we end up cutting our own. We write these scenes in movies and we just cut them all because it's like, oh, we got to run for the exit. And TV is about like spending time with people. And these people come into your home every week and you spend an hour with them and they become friends that you enjoy spending time with, as opposed to like, quick, jump off the building. You're like, you want to spend time with them, see how they're growing, see how they're evolving, see if this problem is, worrying them the way it's worrying you for them. It becomes more personal.
That's such a great point. I think that's such a great thing to bring up too, in terms of writing character, like a movie character, like to use your Die Hard example, like John McClane is like a super fun guest you have at a party and everybody thinks is hilarious and, makes an impression and then he leaves and you never see him again. Like that's a great TV or movie character. Whereas a TV character is like, someone who comes over every week and you get to know their, what makes them tick. And I think, audiences really kind of fall in love with TV characters in a way, and you have just so much more latitude to get personal and to do these kind of headspace moments where you're not constantly in motion. And I think that's from a writing standpoint just so much more fun and interesting.
Breaking down, like the way you break a movie and structure a movie is about the turns in plot. You sort of start with the turns in plot and then you fill it in from there. Whereas television, it's interesting. We'll get into this a different day, but the way we do it and the way we learn to do it is you structure it emotionally, one character at a time. You sort of go through this character's emotional journey. We call it emojos. So we do the character's emojos. So we go through this character's journey, top to bottom, like what they go through this entire episode, and then the next characters, and then blend those once you have those beats. And some of those things won't fit, but it ends up creating all these like little in-between moments that in a movie you would never think to put in. But, somebody having their coffee in the morning, they see something on the street that affects them in a way that colors the way they experience their next event of the day. It's a nice way to really delve into these downbeat moments that you just rarely have space for in a movie. Another thing about television that's different from film is, Drew and I came up, we did indie movies where we raised the money, we wrote, directed, edited, sound designed, sometimes shot things, sometimes like we kind of did all, produced. Drew, our first indies, Drew produced with literally, he didn't even have a production assistant. Drew was the entire producing everything. Like, and he just looked like he'd been through a war at the end of it.
Was that the dry spell? What was that?
That was Poughkeepsie.
Poughkeepsie tapes. Yeah. I had no idea what I was doing. Trying to be the line producer and UPM at the same time. I had no idea what I was doing.
Manager and I remember like every day, like Drew would be so like running ragged, you had like no PA.
One day I realized I had $124,000 on my personal Amex. I'm like, I can't believe this credit card still works. Like, how did this happen? And how did they let this happen?
With zero income.
Was that the year? Didn't you gobble up your entire 401k?
I did.
He had been an investment banker, and he was like a big guy in New York City, and he had a 401k, and then it all just turned.
Yeah, I needed it. It was needed far before retirement. Yeah.
I remember getting a call from my parents back in that era saying, like, "You've ruined your life. Why are you ruining Drew's too?"
All your fault.
I know, but
so
we
funny.
came up, Drew and I came up like worrying about every detail, like every detail mattered to us. And frankly, like kind of every detail kind of mattered equally. Like how many production trucks, were showing up on the day was something we would discuss, as well as the shot selection and, every beat of the script. And then, we got into movies, and, as an example, like in a movie, you direct a movie, and then in post, you have a 10-week director's cut where the studio's not allowed to interfere. They're not allowed to see anything. You have, by the DGA, you have 10 weeks to hone every moment of your, movie before you show anyone. In television, you have 4 days. That 10 weeks for, 90 minutes becomes 4 days for an hour.
The movie director's cut, sorry to cut you off, but like after that 10-week director's cut, then you have like another, 4 months or something to be working it with, the studio and addressing notes and whatever else. And, as John just said, the 4-day director's cut in TV, then you have, maybe another week of notes and everything before the picture is locked, so you're locked within 2 or 3 weeks in TV, where that's usually like a year in features.
Getting it perfect applies to writing as well. I know for myself, like when I write a movie script, by the end, I literally have it memorized. I could tell you, I could just sort of recite the scenes because I've taken that scene and I've polished it again and again until it's exactly what I want. And with a movie, you only have one chance to say something. Do you know what I mean? If these two enemies are going to become friends, Cool Hand Luke and the big guy are going to become friends, you have one chance to do it. And so since you only have one chance, it's got to be awesome and special and perfect and polished. And at TV, you're going to do it again and again. The characters are going to fall in and out of love. They're going to create alliances and pull them apart. There's not one chance to do something. It's more like you're doing it once every, 4 episodes. And also for a movie, it's just you. So you're getting it all tickety-tackety perfect to your liking. In TV, like you write the draft and you hand it over and everybody jumps in with notes. And there's a whole team of people doing it. So for me, honestly, by the time the episode comes out, I don't even remember who wrote that line or who came up with that idea. It's like a blur because an entire team of writers has been throwing in their ideas and their bits of dialogue and their cool moments. Sometimes you can remember, sometimes you can go, that moment is so John Temple, or like, that moment is so Alice Dennard. I know exactly who came up with that. But for the most part, it's just a big stew where not only do you not have it memorized the way you might as a writer in a film, you kind of forgot it even happened. So that by the time you're watching the episode, you're like, right. We came up with that scene that I've completely, not only do I not remember who wrote it, I forgot we even wrote it at all.
Yeah.
Like a movie is more like being a composer. It's like Mozart, carefully crafting every single note of a piece. Whereas television is a lot more jazz. It's more like, the drummer's doing that now. I'm gonna play. I'm gonna riff with that, and it becomes, we like to say it's all jazz. Like people say, like, are you planning to shoot this from there or there? And we're like, it's all jazz. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. And,
You're like, no, but seriously, where should we put the camera?
Seriously, we're setting it up.
It's happening right now.
And that's our AD on the latest Waco season kept quoting us like, it's all jazz. But it is. It becomes, for Drew and I and Stacy, all three of us, I'd say have real perfectionist leanings. I guess those two are straight A students. I was a mixed bag of like
depended on the
courses,
year,
depended on the year and how interesting I found it. But I'd say all three of us have real perfectionist tendencies. And television just straight up does not allow that. Like our season 1 of Waco, it was like a freight train hit us. Like we were so difficult at times, for people because we were, if someone else was directing, we were like right there, like, vultures. Like, wait, no, I think the camera should. We were so kind of up people's, butts as showrunners on that one. And then season 1 of Pickett, when we did that was our next series we did of Joe Pickett. We started that way and we're like, we can't do 7 months of this. We won't survive 7 months of this. We have to trust the process. I have to say, I remember, with season 1, Steven Shabosky, who's Stacy's brother and my brother-in-law, fantastic director, fantastic writer, wrote The Perks of Being a Wallflower and stuff. And he was like our friend who had done a television series. He did Jericho. And I called him on season 1 of Waco. I was like, okay, what advice would you give me? And his advice was go with the stream. It's like a river. Television is like a river, that like a torrential river. And if you're trying to fight your way up the stream, it will kill you. So you float within the stream, like let the stream carry you, and you can work within that, but you can't fight this, like the stream. And I'd say, television, it moves so fast, and part of what you lose in time, you gain in other people helping and other people's creative involvement. And so you may not have a year to really think through every facet of your script, but you have 10 people who will all think it through every day with you. And you trade, one for the other. And that stream of, playing jazz with 10 people in a writer's room, you have to trust that. You have to trust that will be a listenable, piece of music at the end of the day.
I think, in season 1 of Waco was, like John said, it was like a freight train hit us, but we kind of entered that project thinking, okay, the reason we're being hired to do this, or the reason we're being, financed to do this, is because we're movie people making TV, and they want it, they want this show to feel like a cinematic experience, like a feature, and like they want feature quality within, the TV medium, and so we need to micromanage, everything like we have in the past, and that was just a false premise. You don't need, I think, the same amount of time to make it feel like that kind of feature quality. Now it's just kind of understood. You hire, the cinematographers and the composers that are high level. You get, actors that feel like they're movie actors. And it has that feeling without having to micromanage like you do in a feature. And you just simply don't have the time. And so I think there's something really freeing in the TV pace, I think, and that for anyone like us who are, have perfectionist, tendencies, I think there's something in that pace where you make a decision once and you have to move on, and you can never, there's not time to go back and revisit a decision. And there's something really amazing about that. And now that we've done a handful of seasons of TV, I kind of love that. I love that, you might see it at the end of the day on TV when it airs and be like, oh, well, maybe we would have done that little thing a little differently, but you just let it go. And it's been such a great, 6-7 year exercise in letting things go, and I find it just really creatively freeing now, not having that time. It's almost a positive.
It's such a weird experience of being the writer on set of what you were just talking about. It's very weird when there's a scene, they blocked it out, but it's going to take a couple hours. Hey, maybe it goes well and only takes an hour to shoot. It's very weird being the on-set supervising writer, and like they're shooting the scene. That's the scene. That's the scene that you have been talking about maybe for 18 months. You know what I mean? Like you talked about it, you thought about it, you wrote it, you rewrote it, they wrote it, they rewrote it. It's been a big deal in your life, for like a year. And then they do it, and an hour later it's done. And you're like, it's fucking done? What? What?
That's it.
It's done. They're never going to do it again. He's never going to throw that soup can again. What we've been talking about, that soup can for 9 months. Yeah. Wow, it happened and it's over. I wanted to leap into, you guys keep talking about time, and part of the difference is everything goes so fast. I think another aspect of that is, and you're hinting at this before, it's not just about the fast pace, it's about the sheer number of people. You know what I mean? It's not one writer, it's a whole bunch of writers. It's not getting notes once every 3 months, it's getting notes all the time. It is a group sport. TV is a group sport. And that metaphor you used before, the analogy you used before, John, of, swimming upstream, you could be that one jackass who's like, no, do it my way. I thought it would be like this. And then you've got this river that, by the way, is filled with like executives, DPs, ADs. They're all in their inner tubes going with the river. So if you're the jackass who's swimming upstream, you're going to get conked in the head by all these other people. Whereas if you just go with it and turn around and go with them, it's a whole river of talented people. And like you were talking about before, you just have to trust them. You have to be like, well, I don't have to decide what the shot's going to be, because you know what? This genius DP over here is going to help me figure it out, or figure it out all by themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to loop back to what Drew is, saying about just the I don't know, sheer volume of the job. Like one of the things, Drew and I in our movie career, were never apart for anything. We were side by side every moment of shooting. We were side by side every moment of editing, every moment of sound mix. Like, we were inseparable. We were never apart. And then this last year, and really, season 1 of Waco, like all of it, like we've always, we're a brothers duo in like the most like, like, conjoined twin kind of
Yeah.
version of that. And then this last year, we had 2 shows. We were lucky enough to have 2 shows greenlit, and we were show running them both and directing a whole bunch of episodes. And we realized, like, hey, anytime if I look right and I look left and I see Drew like in one of those places, there is something that's not getting done somewhere else. And we really had to not just learn to trust ourselves and trust the creative instinct in the moment, but trust each other's creative instinct in the moment in absentia. There was so many big decisions and things that we just had to be like, okay, I know Drew's got it and Drew knows I have it. Like, and I trust his judgment, on the sound mix. Like, he trusts my judgment, going through what the composers did for this episode. Like, we've just had to, it's not just allowed, but kind of forced us to grow too, if that makes sense. Like, both as collaborators and as a creative duo. We like to say, between the 3 of us, Drew, me, and Stacy, we're like a swarm of bees. There's always one of us buzzing around, and all 3 of us really, Stacy was managing set for a huge part of, Pickett, and just knowing that, like, if there's problems, Stacy will know what to do. TV has forced us to grow in a way that we wouldn't necessarily have in features.
I think that's right. In features, you're making a movie until it's done, and then you start thinking about the next movie. There's really not the same kind of volume and, different projects at the same time. And we had one show in Santa Fe and one in Calgary. And so some of this, kind of separation was by necessity. We were just in different geographies. And, one of us would be directing in Santa Fe, and the one who wasn't directing could go up to Calgary and be prepping that show. And we found it really, a bit stressful for sure, but also really fun. And again, that kind of letting go of the perfectionism, letting go of the micromanaging, and just knowing, like, even if something's not perfect, and it's in the can and we're in editorial, we'll find a way to fix it. We have a lot of faith in ourselves in terms of our abilities in post-production and just what's possible in post-production. Like, it doesn't have to be totally perfect. You can come back around to it in post.
I used to worry a lot more about, like, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? Like, I would try to pre-think a solution to every possible future problem in movies. And it's almost like that, I think it was Aristotle said that, like, my mind then will know more than my mind now. Like, I will have the same mind when that problem arises, and I'll be able to figure it out because I'll know the variables then, where I don't know all the variables now. So worrying doesn't make any sense.
I was going to mention just one kind of maybe, broader topic on selling a show, like, and again, using the Waco season 1 as a personal experience. But, we're so excited, to move into TV. We got 2 amazing actors attached to then go sell it. And then when going to sell it, of course, we wanted to, like everybody wanted to be at, Netflix and HBO and kind of these, premium outlets. And in the TV game, it's so rapidly evolving in terms of who's buying what. And we ended up selling it to Spike, which at the time had been, like a kind of a male focused, reality network for the most part.
It was like the Cops channel, right?
Yeah. We were like, when that came up, when the studio's like, Spike is making a full series order. Nobody else made a series order. There's other people interested in developing it, but no one else was like, we're giving you all the money to go shoot season 1 except for Spike. And we're like, yeah, you mean the network with the Cops reruns? Like, I don't get it. And they're like, well, they just bought, another show from Taylor Sheridan called Yellowstone. And they want, Waco and Yellowstone. And
Spike bought Yellowstone?
Yeah. And they said, these are going to be their first 2 scripted shows on this new network. They're changing directions and they're going, going
of
with
course.
scripted. And so we were concerned, we obviously had a couple actors that were also concerned about, where this was going and what kind of show this was going to be. They trusted us. They liked the
Cashiers.
scripts, but, the network is a big part of it. And, John and I, as an aside, we've kind of made an entire career out of only having one buyer. We've never, until Stacy wrote something recently that we had a proper bidding war. Like we never had that. We've always, we always like to say, you just need one. You won't get, super rich that way, but you'll stay working at least. And so Spike, we kind of said, okay, we have no idea. We have no idea what the future holds, but just keep our head down, keep grinding, keep writing good stuff. And we'll just, audiences will find it, one way or another. TV is, evolving so rapidly. People know how to find shows. And so we have to have faith that the audience will find the show if it's good. And, pretty soon Spike became a Paramount network and there was a big consolidation and that branding kind of changed overnight. And Yellowstone was getting press even before it came out as, a show to watch and just everything, things that were completely out of our control that we have absolutely nothing to do with, just, kind of came together in a way that really worked for the show. And it was kind of a lesson in like, don't overthink it. If you have a buyer that's going to make your show, go make your show. I think that's really it. And audiences will find it, even if the network is not your favorite and not your top choice, like audiences will find it. And it's a minor miracle to get a show made. So if you have someone wanting to make it. That's my advice.
And now, these years later, like, we really wanted Netflix, HBO, Showtime. And then during the pandemic, Paramount Network leased the show out to Netflix and it did really well on Netflix. And then Showtime now has bought it. So now it's at Showtime. And so, at the end of the day, because we just kept our head down and kept pushing, it actually ended up on, all these networks that we really hoped it would be on to start with. Yeah. It's sort of this, it got there because, we just rolled with it. We went with the stream. We followed, Shabosky's advice and just trusted the journey.
And now season 2 is a Showtime original. It's such a strange, winding road for every project out there, especially ones that go, multiple seasons. Joe Pickett was a Charter Spectrum original for season 1. And then Spectrum decided they didn't want to do original content anymore, and Paramount Plus took it over, and now season 2 is a Paramount Plus original. So it's another example of like, you just don't know. You just have this world changes so quickly. If you just stay in the game and just keep making your show, and the world will do what it does.
Yeah, your partners can and will change.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. And often, the execs you start a show with aren't the execs you end a show with. Like, you just have to, trust the instincts, trust your partners and your collaborators, and just trust the journey. The journey, like at the end of the day, it does feel like it's guided somehow. That the universe guides a show into creation, and you're just one, part of that. One other thing I want to talk about with TV is, the upside. Like as a writer, so when I was at the University of Iowa as a college kid. And I decided I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to write for movies specifically because I wanted to write more dialogue than prose. And I just liked the idea of writing for movies. I just thought it was cool. And then I read an article somewhere that said, basically directors can change anything they want in your script. They don't even have to tell you. Like a writer, TV or movie writers are kind of, nobody cares what they have to say. And immediately I was like, well, then I need to learn to direct so I can protect, my writing. And so I transferred to NYU to study film. And all these years later, like what I didn't know is in television, the writer gets to be the boss. The writer is, runs the show. Show running is in many ways a writing job. And it's, there's directing aspects to it, but it's, a lot about the writing. And it's interesting. So if you're a writer and you have a movie script and you have a problem that could be a chronic problem that could, that you see a pathway to stretch out into 3 years. If you can move that into television, you can have a lot more say in how things are done. And, the TV directors work for TV writers, where it's quite the opposite in movies. So I almost feel like if you're a writer and you want that, kind of say over how things are done, like television, I would say I would recommend, putting a real eye towards television because, writer's the boss of TV.
And you get a weekly paycheck, which is quite nice.
Which is great. Yeah, the economics of
a
TV
weekly check,
is a lot more.
Talk about how you guys get
predictable.
paid for movies. It's like
Yeah, a
chunks.
movie.
It's like
Your script, you don't get paid on a movie for your script until day one of photography. So that gives you an eternity for this thing, for a movie to fall apart and get paid nothing. So, and all the way, all the months and months before pre-production starts, but then even all of pre-production, a lot of things go sideways, and but you get basically nothing until day one of shooting, where it's basically there's no turning back at that point, and then you get paid. And TV, you get paid along the way, and that's really it's a lot more sane, financial
awesome.
security compared to features, that's for sure.
you can plan for stuff. You
Yeah,
can put a new
and
roof on.
to
Because
John's
you
point
can predict the
about-
future.
Yeah, to John's point about the writer being the boss, I would say, the lesson we learned was don't be afraid of bringing on a partner that knows things you don't know. If you're an amazing writer, but you don't have much, production experience, for example, showrunner is the head writer and scripts are, the kind of most important part of the job. But you also need to know how to hire a costume designer and a cinematographer. And you need to know, talent agents to talk to about casting. And like, you're kind of you wear so many hats that if you don't have the experience in some area, find a partner, bring someone on that does have that experience, and don't be afraid of ceding any power in the situation. Like the showrunner and the writer's always going to be the boss, but you'll be expected to, crew up and cast the show and go look at locations and be able to kind of, compare locations, where you're going to shoot the thing and what state or in what country. And all those things are very, producery kind of topics. And if that's not an area you have in your skill set, then, try to find the partner that does. And I think it's all about choosing partnerships. I think that is such a huge part of TV where, again, in movies, you try to keep everyone out of the room while you do your thing. And it's more about playing defense and protecting your creative vision from, a lot of opinions where TV, you have to just embrace that.
So in summary, if you're thinking of adapting your, script from a movie to TV, ask yourself if the problem is acute or chronic, and whether you can shift something from an acute problem to a chronic problem. Keep it emotional. Roll with it, get ready to, television is about rolling with it. Don't fight the clock. Find others you can lean on and trust them to do, their part. So it's more than a one-person job. There's no one person who could run a show by themselves and have perfect do it all themselves. It'll destroy anyone who tries. Keep your head down, keep moving forward.
And you only need one. You only need one buyer.
Yeah.
And keep it about relationships and alliances
Yeah.
rather than story.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Next week,
And
I
next-
think we're going to have a guest. We'll start talking to other people, right?
Yeah, we'll start bringing on some guests here.
That's going to be super fun. Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.